Welcome to the show. It's IB Nation Sports Talk, and we're off and rolling on a Wednesday. Hope you're having a great one, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. Looks like it's we were talking about Kirk Cousins going to Great Clips earlier this week. Looks like maybe you could use one of those MV what they call it, most valuable fade cards.
I'm good. My hair is exactly where I need it to be.
Is it now? Is it? All right. Maybe it's the rest of the scrunch that you got going there. Jesse's on for the first time this week. We haven't heard your reaction to the big news, the big announcement that we made earlier this week. We're getting closer to the start of the season, as Johnny S3 says, 46 days and a wake up. That's until kickoff. We've got 15 days until the start of training camp, and we have just 5 days until we kick off a new era of this show as we start on WSBT Radio Weekday Sports Beat next Monday.
Exciting times. It's a fun opportunity to, I think, expand our audience even more, but still kind of get the local, yet maybe what you could say national interaction that Irish Breakdown brings. So you have more of the local crowd. Then you've got your, non-local crowd, and bringing those together, I think, is something that's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm kind of nervous because, people are going to be driving around their cars,
yelling at you on the
South
radio.
Bend. Yeah.
I mean, who's to say they weren't doing it already? Like Bluetooth, like when I drive home, when I'm driving home from a Notre Dame football game from the stadium after the game, and the post-game show is on, I Bluetooth the YouTube right into my car so I can listen to them on the way home. And I think Tommy does that when he's driving around in his truck when we're doing it live. So, I mean, who's to say they're not already yelling at you right now? Craig wants to know, are we going to be on WKRP? We could be. There's nothing wrong with the audience that we already have, Salty. That's why it's so important that we keep doing this show on YouTube. We're glad that we're bringing everybody, all the IB people, over with us, and we're giving more exposure to Irish Breakdown and IB Nation Sports Talk to the local South Bend market in this whole vicinity here. So we're very excited. We want to keep the interaction. I think this is the first time Salty's been in one of our shows this week. I don't think that we've seen him commenting on this, but we're very excited. We want to keep the interaction going in the chat and the whole thing. So very up on that. Like next Wednesday, we fully plan on doing a mailbag show, just like today. We plan on keeping the mailbags going. So it will be up to the Irish Breakdown crowd to provide good quality content for everyone listening on their radios here in South Bend. ND Sailor wants to know if the show will be on the WSBT app or the Sports Beat app. I'm not positive, I know there was a Sports Beat app. I know there has been a WSBT app. I don't know if it will be one over the other or both. That'll be a question. I'll have to ask our friend Jim on Sports, who's been in the show here for the last couple of days. Maybe he'll pop in today and let us know the answer to that. I do know that, again, from an Irish Breakdown standpoint, we'll start the radio show on Monday, but we'll still be streaming live here on this exact same channel. So if you're used to coming here to Irish Breakdown and watching IB Nation Sports Talk, only thing that's going to change is the name. It'll be IB Nation Sports Beat as of next week. There will be, we'll still post the podcast on the Irish Breakdown podcast platform. So you'll still be able to listen that way. And there is live streaming, ND Sailor, in terms of the WSBT side, but I'm not exactly sure which one. We probably should have had that communicated, but we didn't. But I'll find the answer to that, and I'll be able to tell you tomorrow. Actually, once we start doing some questions, maybe I can fire off a text and I can get the answer tonight, as a matter of fact. Speaking of which, it is mailbag night, so get those questions in the mailbag. Salty, as always, bombed it, and he filled it chock full of questions tonight. I'm going to start with Mark's question, though, because I think this is a real interesting one from a Notre Dame perspective. If Notre Dame wins the national championship, will the administration become satisfied and be more inhibiting to the football program to avoid the perception of losing its academic standing? Repeating the Lou Holtz frustration. What do you think about that?
What is it? Can you clarify what it means to be inhibiting to the football program?
I think he's basically saying, will they de-incentivize, winning if they win a national championship? And like what he's saying, they kind of tighten the academic nooses a little bit after they won that championship in 1988.
No, I just think that Notre Dame is on a trajectory right now that includes, a landscape of winning football games, but also being a strong academia school. And I think that, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like Marcus Freeman does a good job of selling the academia side to the recruits. Like I don't think that Marcus Freeman and his staff and his recruits see the academia part as a barrier or a struggle. I really think they found a way to, present it as, something that's a positive or something that you can gain from going to Notre Dame compared to a lot of these other schools, right? Because what you do is you just say, hey, not everyone's going to go to the NFL. It's a less than 1% chance, but a Notre Dame degree is going to do far more for you after football than anything else. So I just think it's something that's always going to be hand in hand in the way that this staff and Marcus Freeman approaches it. They don't speak on it like it's a barrier or something that's blocking them, So I just think that's going to kind of continue to be the path forward.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they found a pretty happy medium, and I think that going forward, one thing to remember with all of these other schools joining, whether it's the Big Ten or the SEC or whatever everybody else was doing, Notre Dame obviously still prioritizes being independent. They've got their TV contract. That's a big part of it. But the other part of it is, remember, with that run to the national championship game last year, there was something, by the time it was all said and done, it was something like another $20 million that came directly to Notre Dame that they didn't have to share with any conference members because they're not in a conference for football. So that is Notre Dame's money. And so with all this other stuff going on with revenue sharing, where you've got, more money going out now, and obviously with NIL and everything else, I think that there is going to continue to be a high priority placed on helping one of the marquee programs in all of the nation, and obviously Notre Dame's marquee athletic program, helping them stay as highly competitive as possible. So I don't see them changing things to make things harder for them going forward, because it's in everyone's best interest that Notre Dame keeps winning, because at the end of the day, more winning means more windfall for everybody. That's kind of how it's always worked. So I think that, as you said, Marcus Freeman and his staff have got things figured out. And I think that's what they're doing is going to continue on down the road. Don says during the Lou Holtz era, Prop 48 was in effect. And that was a completely different, like everyone kind of, like Zorich and Rice were Prop 48 guys. And there's just a whole lot different era back then, with different academic restrictions and stuff like that. It's a lot different now. So I don't see Notre Dame going backwards on any progress they've been able to make over the last several years. It's a good question, though. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. We are stoked about this new radio deal, and everyone at Irish Breakdown is stoked about it. Vince is stoked. Brian's stoked. Jesse's stoked. I'm stoked. We're all stoked. It's going to be fun. A lot of good stuff. One of the questions from Salty: do you expect Penn State to improve, decline, or stay about the same?
I expect them to stay relatively about the same. Maybe like a slight improvement, just because I think Drew Aller should be a better quarterback. They have, two really good running backs. Obviously, their defense, yes, they lost their defensive coordinator, but they still have a ton of really talented pieces on defense, a lot of depth. The only thing I worry about is offensive side of the ball. Can they actually pass the ball to anyone outside of Tyler Warren now that he plays for the Indianapolis Colts? I think that's a huge question mark.
They did bring in some transfer portal receivers. Like they got, I think it was the best receiver from Syracuse, and they've got a couple other guys. So at least on paper, they think they're going to be better this year.
I would say it's either going to be slightly in either direction. I don't see them being drastically better or drastically worse. I see them kind of really just toeing the line of kind of where they were last year.
I do too. And it might appear that they're better because we've talked about this. They've got a cupcake schedule. They're going to they play Ohio State and they play Oregon. And really their season comes down to those two games. But even losing those two games, if they're competitive, there's a pretty good chance that they're going to get into the college football playoff with the two losses if they're to those two teams, or even if they split those two games and happen to fall to somebody else, which I don't really think is going to happen based on, again, what their schedule looks like. So I think that ultimately they're going to be about the same because they do have Aller and they do have the two running backs. They've still got a good defense, and they obviously brought in Knowles. They brought in a high-profile defensive coordinator, and they think that that's going to push them over the top. But when they're going up against some of the other elite teams in the country at the end of the season, I think they'll be about the same. James Franklin, his big game record is pretty much on par with what Brian Kelly's big game record is, whether it's at Notre Dame or LSU in terms of top 10 teams and that kind of thing. So I think that ultimately they'll stay about the same. Oh, yes, Roy. He's got a San Francisco 49ers logo. The Cowboys shirt makes its first appearance here this season. By the way, I got the answer to the question about the apps in terms of where our show will be streaming outside of the YouTube video. The Sports Beat app does not exist anymore. They stopped providing service to it when they launched the current WSBT app. So again, in terms of listening to the show live, when we start on WSBT Radio and Weekday Sports Beat next Monday, you can still watch it live here on the YouTube channel, and you will also be able to stream it live audio-wise in the WSBT Radio app. And make sure you look for radio because there is also a WSBT TV station here in town, the CBS affiliate. But the WSBT Radio app is where you'll be able to find Sports Beat audio streaming live starting next week. ND Sailor wants to know, Texas, Ohio State, does Arch Manning win at the Horseshoe?
No. Well, I don't know. The more I think about this, like Ohio State has a lot to replace on both sides of the ball. Quarterback, running backs, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, safety. I'm actually going to say I think Arch Manning's going to win this game because I think he's going to be a more experienced quarterback than what whoever
Julian's saying, your guy.
And
I said it for you so you didn't have to.
I think Texas has more returning in the skill positions, less turnover. I mean, both teams lost a lot to the draft, but I would say, and first game of the year, so there's going to be kinks on both sides of the ball to iron out for both teams. I would just say, just because Arch Manning has a little bit more experience, I would give him the slightest edge. I think it's going to be a really close game. Both teams are obviously very similar. Both lost a lot to the draft. But I'm going to say that Arch Manning is going to be better than Julian. And I think that'll be the ultimate kind of factor in this game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great game to open up.
I think it comes down to like 3.5, 4.5 points.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. It should be close. Texas has some losses themselves, but I think that, and Ohio State is going to have some good receivers, but they do have it. I think that ultimately they had more churn than Texas had. And you've got a quarterback with a little bit more experience, who obviously a lot of people really love. Some people might think that he's overrated, but and Julian saying, if you say one thing about Ohio State, they obviously are able to go out, evaluate, and recruit and sign elite talent, and they just keep bringing it through there. Look at all the quarterbacks that they've had drafted, over the last several years. So, I mean, I think Saban ultimately is going to be fine, but I think that to start the season, I think Texas is just going to be a little better, even in a road game. So I do think that the Longhorns and Arch Manning end up winning that opener. Let me see. Who will have the better season, Dabo at Clemson or Kalen DeBoer at Bama?
I'm going to go Dabo Swinney. I think they've been kind of on the, since his rut a couple years ago, I think Dabo's been slowly kind of back on the incline. He's got an experienced quarterback. What you think of him is your own opinion, but he still is, I think, going into his third season now as a starting quarterback. They got a new defensive coordinator. I think they're recruiting well on both sides of the ball. I feel like Dabo Swinney's just out ahead of this kind of recovery curve, compared to DeBoer at Alabama. And I think he obviously plays in an easier conference. So that's going to bode well for him. He doesn't have to play in the SEC like DeBoer does. It's just not as hard. So right. I'm just going to say, I think Clemson's going to win the ACC this year.
And look, more questions with Ty Simpson right now coming into the season than there are with Klubnik at Clemson. There's the Klubnik hype train isn't quite what the Arch Manning hype train is, but still, I mean, it's like a lot of people that think that the Garrett Nussmeier Klubnik duel in the first game is, when they play LSU and Clemson, is going to be a couple of guys who might end up in New York City for the Heisman, Trophy, Heisman Trophy finalists and all that kind of stuff. And when it comes down to it, it's not that Alabama has a brutal schedule. They've got Florida State to open up. They've got Wisconsin. But they've got a typical SEC schedule. They've got Georgia. They've got Tennessee. They've got South Carolina. They've got LSU. And then they, finish with their rival Auburn. Whereas for Clemson, it's basically kind of like we were talking about with Penn State. It's a 2-game schedule. Their toughest games are at the beginning and end of the year. They open with LSU. They close with their rival South Carolina. There's a little bit of a sneaky one in there, like they go to Louisville this year. They've got SMU as well, but because of the talent that they're both, I think, fairly similarly talented teams, but Clemson's schedule is just a little bit easier. So I think that Dabo's ultimately going to have the better season at Clemson as a result. ND Sailor, we will talk about the Nick Saban possibly coming back to Clemson and what some of those destinations could be in rapid fire. We're saving that one for rapid fire. We've got that one queued up and ready to go. Dawn, ditto with the swing off for the home run or for the All-Star game last night. We'll get to that in rapid fire as well. What's that?
Swing off. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
The swing off?
Yeah.
Who would have thought of such an idea?
I don't know. I don't know where that idea came from to negate extra innings.
Notre Dame Day. Notre Game Day. Okay, I see what you did there. A little play on words that we got going on. Now that Notre Dame made a convincing run at the Natty and the 26 recruiting is turning heads, how much do you think the respect for Notre Dame football will be reflected nationally? Vegas odds, commentator comments, etc.
So I think that Notre Dame will gain a little bit more respect nationally just because of Marcus Freeman and who he is as a coach and the run that they ultimately made last year. But, I just kind of have to break it to you if, kind of Ricky Bobby style here. If you're not first, you're last, So like getting a second place trophy, I don't really think changes anything for anyone. I think when Notre Dame, and in order for Notre Dame to gain that full respect between Vegas, commentator, like you just have to win the thing, like look at Ryan Day in Ohio State. Like he had 4 really good first years, 5 years maybe with Ohio State, but he still got hammered because he wasn't winning the national championship or he was losing to Michigan So I just feel like it comes with the territory. You're a national program. You're a historic program, considered one of the blue bloods of college football. To me, it's always going to be national championship or bust, winning it, not just getting there, but winning it.
I mean, Vegas is always going to come down to, first and foremost, how they think they can make money on both sides, but Notre Dame is working its way up the ladder. And right now they are sitting just outside, I think, the echelon of college football's elite. They win a national championship. They're in that picture. What Marcus Freeman is, like to the commentator comments thing. I mean, you've already, especially since he got them to the national championship game last year in just year 3, you've already seen a lot more national respect for this program and for Marcus Freeman, and you continue to hear it. Now, that doesn't mean everyone's always going to be picking Notre Dame, but like the guys on game day and McElroy with his radio show and all these other different people out there, Joel Klatt and everybody else, like there's already much more love and praise and roses and everything else that's being heaped on Notre Dame just in the last year than probably, like, more positive stuff that you've heard about them. Because ultimately, what was the knock under Brian Kelly and Notre Dame? Like, Notre Dame couldn't beat good competition. Marcus Freeman, we talked about this yesterday. In 3 straight games, Marcus Freeman beat 3 top 10 teams. That's just one fewer than Brian Kelly won in his whole time, 12 years at Notre Dame. So, yeah, I mean, there's already a lot of good Notre Dame love. And again, that doesn't mean they're always going to be picking Notre Dame, because they do have to, shocker, actually try to be objective and critical at the same time. They've got to pick someone to win. They've got to pick someone to lose every week. But I think you're going to hear them picking Notre Dame to win a lot more than picking Notre Dame to lose. Which team will make the playoffs higher ranked than others if they also qualify? Michigan, Arizona State, Florida, or Georgia Tech?
Which team will make the playoffs higher ranked than others if they also qualify?
Let me just start with this. I think Florida's schedule is too, because again, like I know they've got Lagway and all that stuff. LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and they finish with Florida State. That's not a recipe for success for Florida. So I'm crossing them off the list right away.
My number one team would be Arizona State. I think they have a lot returning. They play in an easier conference compared to the Big Ten and the SEC. And yeah, I just think Florida has too large of an uphill battle. I don't think Michigan's ready to be, fully back yet. They still have a lot to answer, especially their head coach. We don't even know if he's going to be a successful head coach at this level. And I don't have any faith in Georgia Tech at all. So I guess my official rankings would go Arizona State, Michigan, Florida, and then Georgia Tech.
Yep, that's where I'd put it. And Georgia Tech could maybe make some waves, like finish in the top 4 or 5 in the ACC this year. I think that'd be a successful season for them. I don't see them as a legit playoff contender right now. Maybe they shock some people like SMU did last year, but that's the exact order that I think that I would put it in: ASU, Michigan, Florida, and then Georgia Tech. A lot of people just writing off Arizona State for some reason coming into this year. I'm not saying that they've got 17 of 22 starters back, including the quarterback. That's pretty important. It seems like, yeah, in a conference that maybe it's wide open, but I feel like there's a lot more stock being put in Iowa State.
Well, their head coach is very similar to Marcus Freeman, in my opinion, a guy who's very passionate, young, and getting his players to ultimately buy in to the process of the program.
Yeah, exactly. Joseph wants to know who the starting 5 for Notre Dame women's basketball will be this season. Good question. And I was thinking about that. We had KK Bransford on the show yesterday. So you're going to have Hannah Hidalgo.
Prosper.
I would bet that Kassan Prosper is going to be in the starting lineup, and then you are going what? Hold off on Bransford because let me work through this a little bit, because then you've got Malaya Coles, the transfer from Wake Forest, who's going to be one of two healthy, unfortunately, forwards on the roster going into the season. So like you've got Prosper at the 3, Hidalgo at 1, and then you've got Coles, and then you're probably going to go with 3 guards. And so then you also brought in Ayanna Moore from Vanderbilt, who has averaged double figures in scoring, I believe, every season that she was at Vanderbilt, and then probably Bransford as well. So that gets you to 5 there, right there, right? Or is that 6?
I believe that's 5.
Hidalgo, Coles, Prosper, Bransford, Moore. Yeah, that's 5. That's what I would think their starting 5 is going to be. Any disagreement?
Nope.
Again, like thin roster, so unfortunately there aren't a ton of options, but I think that's it's going to be interesting, because talking to KK yesterday, she kind of said what I asked Neil Ivey about a few weeks ago when we had her on, that like they're going to run a lot, they're going to play defense, and they're going to run a lot, like even more than they've run before, and they run a lot as it is. Like I think they're going to be really athletic, and like they're going to get some pace. They're going to get up and down that floor. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Salty caught you. Salty cut. See, you gotta like this. You're gonna work one of those out.
I've just been up since 5:15 today.
How'd that 6 a.m. workout go?
It was pretty good. It was lower body strength day, so a lot less demanding than the cardio days that have come so far this week. I ripped my hands open though. That was the only
man.
Put a blistered
Looks
deadlifting
like
today.
Salty's got a lot of questions about like these multiple. Which team will make the playoffs higher ranked than others if they also qualify? Ole Miss, SMU, Nebraska, or Iowa State?
I think Ole Miss.
But you like Ole Miss at the top of that list?
I do.
See what Ole Miss's schedule looks like this year. Georgia State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane. Very good chance they start 4-0. Then LSU, Washington State, at Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Citadel, Florida, Mississippi State. Legit chance that they're a 2 or 3 loss team and make the playoffs, I think. So I think that's good. I'd put SMU at number 2. They've got Kevin Jennings coming back. They lose a little bit more than Arizona State, but nice dual threat quarterback. I would put them second. I would put Iowa State third, and then I would put Nebraska fourth. Concur?
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Who'll have the better season? Hugh Freeze at Auburn or Brent Venables at Oklahoma?
I think Brent Venables at Oklahoma. I think that they're recruiting better. I think Venables is a more established coach than Hugh Freeze. So yeah, I like Oklahoma better. I just think they're recruiting better. They have a little bit more stability in their program. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think Hugh Freeze is going to be banking. They still haven't figured out quarterback yet.
Yeah.
So
is it Jackson Arnold, the Oklahoma transfer? Interestingly enough, would it be Deuce Knight? That's a question for them. OU does have John Mateer. Had a good year at Washington State last year. They do play head-to-head, which is interesting. I think that Auburn's schedule is slightly better than Oklahoma's. Where did Oklahoma's go? Listen to this finish to the season. From October 11th through the end of the season for Oklahoma: Texas, at South Carolina, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Alabama, Missouri, LSU.
Whew.
Not an easy finish for Boomer Sooner down there. Not an easy finish at all. So I'm going to go Auburn, I think. I'm going to go the other way. You're right. Quarterback is a question, but I just think that they're, again, like they play each other, and I think that their schedule is slightly more favorable than what Oklahoma's is, especially down the stretch. Tommy wants to know, where do you rank Arkansas in the following categories? Overall, trap game, road venue. They're a bottom-tier SEC team. Notre Dame fans seem to be extra worried about them, and I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why either, because when you look at what they've got coming back, there is not a lot. They are not a school that has invested very much in NIL. I don't know if they're hitting up old Uncle Jera there, in Dallas or not, but they're behind most other SEC schools, as far as that goes in NIL and what they're putting into it. And they have a ton of questions. So like, where do you rank them?
I have mine ready.
Okay, go ahead.
I think overall they're a below average team. I think trap, they're right about average. I think you could mess around and lose to them on a bad day. And road venue, I'm just putting this as like road venue. I think they're an above average road venue, but that has nothing to do with the game itself. I think it would be cool to go down there to SEC country, go to an SEC school, see Arkansas. I'm sure it's a beautiful campus and a beautiful venue. So I would say that's kind of where I would go with the above average. But I think everything else, again, overall, they're going to be a below average SEC team. And I think as in terms of trap, it could be, they could be, I think they're a better version of like what NIU was last year. They're still SEC recruits, SEC players, SEC team. So you can't just, and I think it's a noon kickoff as well. So you just can't come out and sleepwalk. So I put them as kind of like a middle of the road trap game.
Yeah. And I mean, Anderson, good OC, good quarterback, solid quarterback, but he's not going to light the world on fire by any means. Yeah. They beat Tennessee at home last season. So you have to be wary of them. I just, as who said it? Someone said Marcus Freeman has owned the SEC. He has done really well. And I feel like that is a game. Like I'm not, do you have to be conscious of it? Of course you have to be conscious of every opponent. Marshall proved that. NIU last year proved that. You're going to be coming out of Purdue, and then you've got Boise State the following week. So like, do you call it a trap because it's the week before Boise State and they were a playoff team last year? All that kind of stuff. I see Notre Dame winning by at least a couple of touchdowns in that game. Because I think the talent on the roster, the overall talent and athleticism on the roster, I think is just going to be head and shoulders better than what Arkansas is able to put on the field when they face them in September. Toonsis says Cowboys haven't won since Clinton's first term. I think that Jerry has bigger concerns than the Razorbacks. I'm surprised he didn't try to get this game down there in Arlington, to be quite honest. Could have sold a lot of tickets for that one, but I'm sure Arkansas is pretty excited to get Notre Dame on their, on campus as well. Craig wants to know, who'll last longer, Lincoln Riley at USC or Brian Kelly at LSU?
Man, that's a good question.
I think it's Riley. I think it's Riley because they both got big, cumbersome buyouts, but USC is in worse shape from a financial standpoint. So I think that ultimately he will last longer than Brian Kelly. Like if they both had shaky seasons this year, I think that Riley would be quicker to the hot seat than BK.
Wait, so you think Lincoln Riley would last longer than Brian Kelly? Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah.
Opposite? Okay.
Because of the fact that their athletic department is still not in good shape right now.
Yeah, I would say
Andrew says Riley bolts to the NFL when he can. I could see that happening, but no NFL team is going to hire him as a head coach if they have an 8-4 season at USC. He's not going to be like, if anything, he would become an offensive coordinator in the NFL before he becomes a head coach if they're just plugging along with 8-4 records every year.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lincoln Riley. I think that the USC is heavily invested in him, and their transition into the Big Ten. You know, they allowed him to bring over Marty Biaggi from Notre Dame. So I think USC is kind of bought all in on Lincoln Riley. I think Brian Kelly and Ellis, there's a shorter leash at LSU and the boosters that are there. You know, I just feel like they've had more recent success. They are in the SEC. You know, they are surrounded by a lot of teams that are performing better than them currently. So I would have to go with Lincoln Riley. I just think there's more expectations at LSU than USC at the moment.
I do too. Speaking of coaches, what kind of / level of pressure does Ryan Day have to beat Michigan, given both the 4-year drought and last season's national championship?
I don't think there's any pressure. He won a national championship last year, and he did it while losing to Michigan. I think if he survived that, I don't think anything could knock Ryan Day down this season unless he goes like 0-12 or something. You know, like I think as long as Ohio State is 8-4 or better, I think that wherever the dominoes fall, he's perfectly fine. The man just won a national championship.
Yeah. I mean, are Ohio State fans going to be mad if they lose to Michigan again? Of course. But you just won a national championship. That's, you know, ultimately that's the prize. That's the big one. That's all that matters. It completely, I won't say it completely. I was about to say completely blacked out the Michigan loss. So, you know, like they're still a little bit salty from that salty, but I don't think that there's any pressure on Ryan Day this year. Like you've got to beat Michigan after you win a national championship last season. No matter what, anything that happens this year is going to be a little bit, you know, it's the icing on the cake if they do beat Michigan this year, especially if they get back to the playoffs once again, you know. And again, we talked a lot about schedules, and there's no reason Ohio State shouldn't be back in the playoffs this year.
Bring up Michael Schwinger says losing to Michigan was a big deal, tainted the season. I won't disagree that it was a big deal, but it definitely didn't taint the season. They won a national championship.
I mean, it tainted the season at the time because it kept them from potentially getting the number 1 overall seed. And it's looking like, man, could this be the thing? You know, it looked like it was going to be the thing that derailed Ohio State, but it's more like a little ink stain on the season, you know, because again, you ended up winning the national championship, and that's Ryan Day got his first national championship. Fans got their
you can't tell me that losing to Michigan outweighs a national championship. I'll never buy that.
Yeah.
And if fans want to berate him for losing to Michigan when they still won a national championship, you're an idiot fan. I'm just sorry. Like seriously, if Notre Dame had won that national championship and fans still gave you a hard time about losing to NIU, you just tell them to get lost. You can't say anything. They were the best team in college football last year.
Yep, exactly. Where was it? Salty again. Will Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and SMU all return to the playoff this season?
I'm good on all of these, I think, except SMU and maybe Georgia.
That's where I am. I think no to SMU, and I think Georgia's going to be a little bit of a bubble team. Like their biggest question is quarterback. Now, granted, you know, just because like one game doesn't mean a whole career for him, but what we saw last year, he wasn't that great. But that's going to be a big question mark for them this season. So I'd say Texas, yes. Penn State, yes. Clemson, yes. Notre Dame, yes. Question marks on SMU and Georgia. I think at least one of those two won't make it. So my answer would be No. Who's the best play-by-play and best color commentator in college football today?
Oh, man. You go, because I got to look up some names here.
I'm going to go with Gus Johnson as the play-by-play guy. I don't think that in terms of the college guys, I don't think there's anyone better than Gus Johnson right now. You get the Gus gasms, and the whole thing. And I realize that some people that is annoying. ND Sailor says Tirico, but he's not doing college anymore. Andrew says Brad Nessler. I think that
Nessler's up there for me.
I think for me, his time passed him at least 5 years ago. I think that Nessler has slid a few notches. I do think that he used to be pretty good, but I don't. I'm not as high on Nessler anymore.
Where do you stand on Charles Davis?
Charles Davis is a color commentator. I'm kind of on him.
He's going to be the new CBS guy.
Yeah, I think he can be a little roses, and he's going to be with Brad Nessler. He can be a little bit roses and sunshine.
Yep, that's what I think too.
McElroy, Indy Sailor. I do think McElroy is pretty good. I think he has gotten better over, and I don't know exactly what the ranking is, and in terms of that ESPN booth, but he was. Oh, Sean McDonough. I think Sean McDonough is really
That's
good
what
as
I was
well.
getting ready to say.
I forgot about him. There you go, Andrew. We can agree on something. Sean McDonough, really good. I like him quite a bit.
I don't mind Blackledge.
Yeah, Blackledge is solid, and even Noah Eagle, who does NBC, with Blackledge. I think young dude, but he is really good as well. I mean, he's the son of Ian, and like if you listen to him, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two.
I think that's my favorite booth is Ian Eagle and Todd Blackledge, just because I have to mute Herb Street and Fowler.
Well, it's Noah Eagle. It's Noah Eagle.
Sorry,
it's not
Noah
Ian.
Eagle.
Yeah.
They're one of the few broadcasts where I can listen to and not feel like I'm getting pissed off because I'll just simply put it like that. Like I can listen to them and not get frustrated at the end of the day. Like I don't feel like there's biasy. I don't feel like there's any of the corniness. I think they're the most business-oriented crew. And same with McElroy. I really like, and I like when Orlovsky does college football, to be honest with you as well. So,
yeah, I think Orlovsky, and I think we talked about it at the time. Orlovsky ultimately signed on to stay at ESPN.
I wish he would just be a college guy and drop anything NFL.
CBS was going after him, and he would have been, instead of Charles Davis, he would have been, I believe, the number one CBS analyst. So he would have been in there with Brad Nessler if he had made that move to CBS. And I just listened to
I think that would have been a good move for him.
Yeah, I think so too. And I listened to an interview of him last week on the SI Media podcast, and he was talking about like he still would have kept his feet, in the NFL if he had gone to CBS. There were some doors for him there. I think he likes that day-to-day grind of NFL Live and all that stuff on ESPN and doing some of the other stuff. Yeah, I think he's a pretty good game analyst, and I think that he could be one of the best college football, color commentators, game analysts if he would jump into that and do it full time, because he doesn't get a whole lot of reps right now as it is.
Yeah.
Because like whenever he shows up and because they usually have him doing a bowl game or two, because there's 8 million bowl games on, once the postseason rolls around, and he's always pretty good. Yeah, Bob Wischusen is solid. Don, I would give him a solid. Andrew says Joel Klatt. Yeah, when he's not cheerleading for Colorado, he's pretty good as well. And I mean, like a lot of people always, like Joe, calling out Fowler for the bias. I just don't think he's a great play-by-play.
I don't either.
Like he's a studio guy who ESPN turned into a play-by-play guy, just like they did with Steve Levy when he had the opportunity to do, Monday Night Football a few years back. And Fowler is just, okay. I think that there are plenty of other, like McDonough is the number 2 guy on ESPN behind Fowler, and I think that McDonough is head and shoulders better than him. Tyler says, "What do we think of McElroy?" Again, I think McElroy's pretty good, and like he does the homework. Like you can tell
Well,
when
that's
you
what
listen to him.
Orlovsky's really good about, is doing the
Right,
homework.
right, and that was the biggest issue that I had, like with the Gary Danielson, Brad Nestler, the couple times that we saw them doing CBS games last year. It didn't feel like either one of them was like fully doing their homework for a couple of nationally broadcast games that involved Notre Dame. But yeah, I do think that McElroy is pretty good. And yeah, I was being nice, Scott, but I don't completely disagree with you. Somebody said Musburger or Keith Jackson, Beefeater, Musburger or Jackson. Do you even remember Keith Jackson?
Nope. So I'd go Musburger.
Oh, Nelly. He's an older guy. And yeah, he retired a few years back. For a long time, he was basically ABC's before it was even ESPN. Like he was the big game, college football guy. Like that was legit college football. Brent Musburger, legit college football before Fowler took it over. This one is tough. I would probably go Keith Jackson because like there maybe there's a little bit more nostalgia there, but like Musburger was doing play-by-play a little bit later. I'm sure he did some early in his career, but like my first memories of Musburger were the NFL Today on CBS, doing the studio show and NFL stuff and some college basketball play-by-play and stuff like that. And then ultimately he became, after he left CBS, he became the like the big gun after Keith Jackson retired. Both really good, but I would lean toward Keith Jackson a little bit more. Just a little more gravitas, I have to say. Mark said, did it surprise me that ESPN went away from savings of virtual commentators during the COVID to on-site again? I think that there were a lot of in like Fox Baseball. Was it even this year? Yeah, like remember, like we were talking about it, like when the season opened in Japan, the Cubs went over there and Cubs and Dodgers to Japan. Fox didn't send over live play-by-play. There's still, and I think hockey tries to get away with it even more from what I've heard. But there are still, every now and then you can tell that there are some remote broadcasts and stuff like that. It's just always better, obviously when you can be at the stadium. But it didn't surprise me that ESPN ultimately got the announcers back there, because I think if you're ESPN, you have to. You can't not send the announcers to big games. Joseph wants to know if I watched Jeff Pearlman's Press Box Chronicles podcast regarding Michael Irvin's Scissorgate incident, which occurred during training camp while Irvin was on probation. I didn't know there was a Press Box Chronicles podcast. I used to listen to some of Jeff Pearlman's. Maybe he's changed the name of it now. I'll have to see if I can find that. Jeff Pearlman wrote the book about the that whatever era, the 1990s Dallas Cowboys. He wrote the book on. Hang on just a second. Thought I had it. Boys Will Be Boys. There it is, right there. So I'm like halfway through the book that Jeff Pearlman wrote, but I haven't listened to that podcast. I'll have to see if I can find that. Have you happened to listen to it, Jess?
I have not, unfortunately.
Okay. Tommy wants to know what event prior to NIL and portal had the most effect on Notre Dame without it really having to do with Notre Dame. Example, Spurrier staying at Florida another year or two, possibly meaning Meyer goes to Notre Dame from Utah.
I would say Marcus Freeman not going to LSU to be the defense coordinator.
Good one. I like that. He said, yeah, it was still prior. That was still prior to NIL and portal, just prior to NIL and portal. I like that. And like the thing with Meyer, I actually, when Urban Meyer had in his final year at Utah, when they were, off and firing and doing so great, and Tyrone Willingham was, had been let go. This was 2004, at the end of the 2004 season. He had been let go at, by Notre Dame. I still can't believe that I did it, but I emailed the Utah Sports Information Director in charge of football. I said, hey, do you think we could have Urban Meyer on our show? And they said, yeah. So we had Urban Meyer on the show, interviewed Urban Meyer when he was at Utah. And I asked him, about interest, of course, in the Notre Dame job. And he gave us a no comment. And, he literally said, I think I'll just no comment on that. But it was pretty cool. So we had him on. And at the end of the day, I don't think that the Spurrier thing, I don't think that there would have been any, because that's Meyer went directly from Utah to Florida that season. And obviously things worked out with him. And ironically, less than a year later, Notre Dame baseball was playing in a regional down in Gainesville against Florida. And, so I'm in my announcer's booth, and sitting in the booth right next to me is Urban Meyer and family sitting right over there. So that was kind of unique.
Circle.
Yeah, little full. But I agree with what you're saying about that. The Marcus Freeman, him not going to LSU ultimately, and he had two chances. He could have gone to LSU. He could have gone to LSU in 2021 when Brian Kelly ultimately convinced him to come up here to Notre Dame, and then he could have followed Brian Kelly to LSU as defensive coordinator. Obviously, once he had the chance to become Notre Dame's head coach, that was out the window. But he had two chances, 2 years in a row, to head down there. Andrew says Perlman is a very good storyteller in that podcast. What was that? The Press Box Chronicles? Is that what it's called? Gonna have to look that up. I'd never heard of that. There was another podcast that Perlman did where he would just like interview other people, other journalists and stuff like that I used to listen to. But I didn't realize he did another one. Which team will make the playoffs ranked higher than others if they also qualify? Tennessee, USC, Florida State, or Kansas State?
Guess my order would go USC, Florida State, Tennessee, and Kansas State.
I'm sorry. Say that I just found the Press Box Chronicles, so I followed.
My list would go USC, Florida State, Tennessee, then Kansas State.
I'm actually going to go Kansas State, Tennessee, USC, Florida State.
Kind of have big different lists here.
Yeah, we do. Kansas State's going to be good. I mean, they're going to be in the thick of things this year. The question is going to be like, is Arizona State going to be at least as good as last year, and to be able to beat Kansas State this year? Because like K-State's schedule, they don't even play Arizona State this year. So K-State has Iowa State, North Dakota, Army, Arizona, Central Florida, Baylor, TCU, Kansas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, Utah, Colorado.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to re-advise. I think Kansas State 1, USC 2, Florida State 3, Tennessee 4.
Okay. I think we're a lot
after
closer.
hearing that schedule.
Yeah. Mark wants to know Discovery and Nat Geo channels Shark Week for you. 1, must watch. 2, okay, some watch. 3, over it.
I'm a 3. I never get into Shark Week.
Yeah, I've never been into the whole shark thing. I've never understood the whole shark craze on those channels. Like me, I don't even want to think. Like I saw Jaws in the, and sharks freak me out. I don't want to be anywhere near a shark if I'm in the water. That's why I don't mind Lake Michigan, nearly as much as the ocean, even though people who live on the coast, like make fun and say that you're not really at the beach if you're at a beach in Lake Michigan compared to the ocean. So I will avoid the Sharks as much as possible. I'm not sure. Salty wants to know what's the biggest lie in college football today. I feel like Salty was very salty.
Maybe this is too obvious, but I think it's a lie that the SEC is still the best conference in football. I think it's a lie that there's still oversight on how much players are getting paid. I still think it's kind of Wild West-esque.
I think that's a good one. I think that there's still a whole lot of, overboard SEC love. Like they're top heavy, but again, like when you look at the middle to the, like I guess you could point to Vanderbilt and say, well, look at Vanderbilt, what they were able to do last year. Well, let's see if they can do it second year in a row. Toons said Vince said that there's still student athletes.
I think that's dependent on where you go.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that that's a good one because I think I remember saying, once NIL became a thing that we probably, like I always thought that the NCAA leaned way too hard into that whole, they're all student athletes and they're going to go pro. And, most of them are going to go pro in something other than sports. I mean, true, but typical NCAA propaganda trying to lean on the virtues of, what they, the amateurism and all that kind of stuff. And that's obviously doesn't exist anymore. It's much closer to professional sports now. Final one. Which is more likely, Drew Aller winning the Heisman Trophy or Missouri getting 10 wins in the regular season? Okay, I went through Missouri's schedule.
Yeah, I'm going with Drew Aller to win the Heisman. Missouri's got a pretty tough schedule.
Yes. They actually play Kansas this year. Border war renewed for the first time since Missouri joined the SEC. South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, Arkansas. They're not winning 10 games. So it's got to be Drew Aller for the Heisman. With that, Jesse, got to get this comment out of there. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do this.
Had it covering it up.
There's a lot of meat on the bone in this rapid fire.
I thought so as well. ESPN.com says CJ Carr is Notre Dame's X factor this season. Is there any other answer for the
Yes, but it's not as strong as CJ Carr. I'll play a little bit of devil's advocate here.
Okay.
I still think Jeremiah Love is an X factor on this season. You need him to perform well at a Heisman level. He needs to shoulder majority of the load on the offensive side, especially when CJ Carr and the offense is struggling. He's still a first-time quarterback, a guy who has no starts yet. Jeremiah Love needs to be there to take the pressure off of CJ Carr when he's having a bad game, when he needs to slow the game down. Jeremiah Love still needs to be there on the offensive side of the ball. It's still going to be – we know Marcus Freeman. He likes to run the ball. He likes to control tempo and clock. He doesn't like to force, errors basically. So I think that is a lot of that load is going to be on Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but more so Jeremiah Love. So that would be my first X factor. And then my second X factor is going to be Chris Ash at the end of the day. He has a large role to fill. We know Al Golden was a great defensive coordinator, and we just don't know how the defense needs to be. If Notre Dame wants to make this run again,
needs to play at least at the same level.
Exactly. And so none of that is given at the end of the day or guaranteed. We don't know that transition from Al Golden to Chris Ash is going to be perfect, and the defense is going to be, at the same level or maybe even better than what they were last year. So my other X factors are Jeremiah Love, just because he's a Heisman contender, and Chris Ash because he's replacing a really good defensive coordinator. And they leaned on their defense a lot last year. The defense was able to really help them out of some tough situations, especially in the playoffs. So, I know they struggled against Ohio State, but they were dominant against IU, Georgia, and in the second half against, or majority of the game against Penn State. They did enough in that Penn State game to win. Obviously, they got the turnover late in the game.
Yeah, Chris Ash would be my answer. Because of all the things that like this is a question, like you can't just assume that because you've got a bunch of great players and you're changing coordinators now that you're just going to drop in and everything is just going to be the same. There are, like, we already saw during the spring, like he kept saying, this is the Notre Dame defense I'm running. But like when you would talk to, different players and some of the assistant coaches during the spring, they would say, well, we're learning a new system, so which is it? Are you running the Notre Dame defense or are you learning a new system? We know they're going to play a little bit more zone. We know that there are going to be some differences, like in the splits of the defensive ends, so like they say, subtle tweaks, but at the same time, like you've got a different guy calling the shots and his mindset is not going to be the same as the guy who just left. So I think that is a huge X factor for Notre Dame this season. Justin says, why does the media assume CJ is the starter? Minchie had a good Jersey game. Okay, but CJ is going to be the starter. So, like, I just, based on everything that I saw going into training camp, there's a reason everyone, thinks that CJ is going to be the starter because he played better. And I think Kenny Minchie is still a really good quarterback, but I think that CJ Carr is the better of the two quarterbacks and the more consistent of the two quarterbacks and, makes fewer mistakes between the two quarterbacks. So, I think that's the way it's going to end up going. Notre Dame has announced Notre Dame has not. Okay. I'm like looking at this question that I wrote and I can't even read it right. Notre Dame has announced their Irish wear green games before the season for the last 3 years. They haven't announced one yet this season. So which game do you want to see them wear green if they do it this season?
So I think looking at the schedule, there's 4 games that come to mind that qualify for green. So we'll kind of go from there and eliminate. I think Texas A&M is a potential green game, Boise State, USC, and Syracuse.
Really? Syracuse, because it's the last game or
seniors last game. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to get rid of Texas A&M because I think it's too early in the season. First home game. I don't think that would go over well. I don't think Boise State is as big of a game. Like I know they were good last year. I don't anticipate them being as good this year. So to me, it really comes down to USC and Syracuse. USC is your longstanding rival. You don't know if that rivalry is going to continue. It's a night game, so there's going to be other, antics going on. So I think it's either USC or Syracuse because, again, Syracuse's senior day. I think they let the seniors pick the green jerseys a couple years ago, and they did end up doing that. So those would be my best guesses, USC and Syracuse.
I think it's going to be USC, and I think it should be USC. I mean, they did it for Ohio State a couple of years ago. Last year it was the Louisville game because basically that was the best home game on the schedule. 3 years ago it was Cal. I think it needs to be USC. It's the night game, and Notre Dame just owes it to the world to make that as electric an atmosphere as possible.
You don't know if you're ever going to play them again at home.
That's exactly right. That's why they owe it to the world to do that. Come out in the greens. Obviously you announce it before the season. I do love the way they've done this, that they are announcing it before the season. You're not waiting until the week of the game. At least that's how they've typically done it. But I think that that should be the game. I think it should be USC, possibly the last time these two teams play in a long time. Maybe Chad Bowden's over there on the other side of the field, and it's kind of like waving at your old, like your ex on the other side of the field or whatever. Just let them have it. Let USC have it with both barrels, and just make it as great and electric an atmosphere as you can. And I think that would help. It's already going to be a great atmosphere, and you're going to have recruits in and the whole thing. Go green and just do it up all right. So Justin was saying, in reference to the CJ Carr, all I'm saying is I thought you all didn't get enough practice time to evaluate the quarterback competition. What changed? I don't think I ever said that. Now, did we get to see a whole bunch of practices? No, but we've seen CJ Carr in live settings the last couple of years. And when you look at, what changed for Notre Dame more than a year ago, at the end of Marcus Freeman's second season, decided that they needed to go to the transfer portal once again to bring in an experienced quarterback because they didn't feel like the quarterback was on the roster, who could be the starter. And at that point, CJ Carr was just joining the team as a true freshman. He went through an entire spring, he went through an entire fall, and he went through an entire season. You got to see him. You got to, from a quarterback coach standpoint, from an offensive coordinator standpoint, kind of what makes this guy tick, the kind of throws he can make. He went through an entire second spring. And I think that, the difference in why you didn't bring in a transfer portal quarterback for a third straight year is because you had the guy on the roster, the guy who everybody is high on. And that's, if I'm going scale of 1 to 10 right now, I'd go a hard 9+ on CJ Carr, ending up the starting quarterback. Beefeater with a follow-up, over under on how many games Minchie comes into the game in relief of Carr. Now, the question is, what do you consider relief? If Carr is the starter and Minchie has a Buckner-like package, he has some kind of package quarterback, do you consider that part of what you're talking about? Or are you talking about
blowout?
Kenny, oh, okay. I was going to say, are you talking about Carr is struggling, so he has to come in? In what way? Or are we just saying, how many times does Kenny Minchie see the field this season?
I would say 3 to 4 games.
Oh. So Beefeater is saying Carr is bleeping the bed. So I would say an over-under of 1.5, and I would take the under. I don't think that's going to happen.
I would put 0.5 and take the under.
Okay. Yeah.
I think he's got to take his lumps. He's going to, it's not going to be perfect year one.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he's going to just come up and he's going to light it up from start to finish and all that kind of stuff, but I think he is going to be a very, because again, I
don't think they're just going to pull the plug on CJ Carr.
Right. I think it would take a lot for that to happen. Look,
he'd have to have 3 straight 3 interception games.
Do you remember Drew Pine? Do you remember Drew Pine throwing the ball into the ground and overthrowing everybody and locking in on only Michael Mayer and all that? Do you remember that? Do you think that CJ Carr is going to be worse than Drew Pine? Because I don't.
I think
when Drew Pine wrote it out. They never went to Steve Angeli, did they? No.
I think if things go bad, you got one Jeremiah Love in the backfield to kind of, de-escalate some situations.
Yeah, they're not gonna give him a quick hook. Yeah, you would, kill his confidence and all those different things. Well, Beefeater says there was no option behind Pine. There was still Steve Angeli. He was still on scholarship. He won the Sun Bowl at the end of the season, and everyone said he should have been the starting quarterback. Not everyone, but a lot of people said he should have been the starting quarterback as a result. I mean, there was a guy back there who had no more experience than what Drew Pine had going into that season. Yeah, I mean, he was still. I get what you're saying.
Amount of experience as Drew
I get
Pine.
what you're saying, Beefeater, but I don't like. They're not going to yank CJ Carr the first time he struggles a little bit.
This isn't going to be like Brian Kelly.
Yeah, exactly. Over under 4.5 uniform combinations Notre Dame will wear this season. Kind of going back to the green uniform question.
Does this include bowl games?
Sure. Now, we're not including names on the back of the jerseys, though, as like a different uniform.
Okay. That clarifies.
Okay. Like actual top-bottom combinations.
I'm going to take the under just because they don't have the Shamrock Series this year. If they added the Shamrock Series, I think that would get me. But last year you had Shamrock Series, you had your home, your away, your greens,
Yep.
and the all whites. So that's 5. I think we'll do all of those. Except
but you had other
Shamrock
combinations last year. Don't forget they had the regular ones, like you said. They had the Shamrock. They had all white. They had
green,
white with gold. I forgot about that. So that is actually. So let me see here. They had regular, which would be blue and gold, like for home, but they also had white with gold because you're on the road. So that's 2. Then you had green with white. That's 3. You had blue and white. That's 4. And then you had all white. That's 5. And then the Shamrock Series was 6. So do you want to change? I guess the question is going to be, are they going to go like a blue and white combination like they did last year against Georgia Tech?
Still sticking with 4. I think you'll have green, all white, your home, and your away.
I think so too. I think it's 4 tops because, again, you have no Shamrock Series, and I don't think they do the blue and white again. But we're also assuming that they do some kind of green at least once this year. Would you ever want to see them for a road game do a white top and green bottoms?
No.
I don't think
I'm all about accenting the green. If you want to add some green accent, sure. But that's where I'm at.
Brian, you're killing me, man. You're killing me.
He wasn't terrible at the end of the day.
Stop the pine hate. He wasn't terrible. Early on, he was horrible. You can't get around that. You just simply can't get around that.
Yeah, but he was
very bad
a
early
tight
on.
situation early.
He got better, but I think it's more a credit to Tommy Rees and what they were able to get out of Drew Pine that season. Because, I mean, look at where Pine's career has gone since then. He's on his 3rd different school, and he's only started a handful of games at the previous 2. I mean, he was serviceable by the end of the season. He got better.
If you were starting a team today, who would you pick to be your starting quarterback? Steve Angeli or Drew Pine?
I'd go Angeli.
Okay.
How about you?
Unfortunately, I'd say Angeli, but I would be leading a MAC program.
Fair enough. Josh wants to know who we think will be the 2nd string corner behind Christian Gray at field. I think that this is an interesting one. Like, could it be Carson Hobbs? Could it end up being Dallas Golden potentially? Could it be Cree Thomas in the mix? And like, you've got a lot of young talent that's going to be fighting for it. I think that right now I might slide my chips toward Hobbs being the guy.
I don't know. I think it's either Hobbs or Golden. It's going to be someone young, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, Golden's the most intriguing one, because of all the hype coming in with him and, can he, is he going to play 2 positions and all that kind of stuff. But I think that he's going to have a really good opportunity, once he gets into camp. And, Craig says Hobbs would be his guess. That's kind of like I said, that's the direction I'm leaning right now, at least going into camp. But we haven't seen any of them out there at camp yet. One more thought on the uniforms, because this black jersey thing, has popped up the last couple of years. Scale of 1 to 10. What do you think are the chances they ever wear black jerseys?
0.
I'm with you.
Notre Dame is a traditional program. They're always going to wear some variation of navy, gold, or green and white.
I agree.
It's just
I don't see black
nothing
happening.
about Notre Dame. Nothing about Notre Dame and their brand and their national outreach says black. Like it's just there's just too much. Notre Dame is too much of a traditional program to wear black. So it's zero. And the fact that it was ever a thing and people swore that they were going to wear black was the biggest waste of time ever.
I know. What a waste of energy. That was almost as useless as the whole "it's too hot in Texas," hand wringing. Justin wants to know, would Hobbs ever replace Gray if he's struggling? If they feel confident enough in him, I think so. But I also don't think that Gray will struggle to that extent. I think Gray was good last year and he'll be even better this year. So, but again, like if they feel like whoever is behind, I think that if they're confident enough that they would put that guy out there on the field.
I need 30 seconds to vent here.
Okay.
Our maintenance guy has been working on our house for the last 3 months, and he just randomly for the last month has been MIA. Yesterday
he shows up.
Yesterday he texts me, "Hey, I'll be there tomorrow. Are you going to be home?" Never. "Hey, can I come by tomorrow? What time are you going to be home?" "I'll be there tomorrow." I said, "Okay, we'll be here in the evening time, but then we're going to be gone all day, or from Thursday to Sunday." No response. Just texted me, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Sweet. Thanks for the heads up."
Yeah. Exactly.
Not like I have a life where I'm doing things.
Right. Well, we better get to some stuff here before your doorbell or whatever starts going
It's
crazy.
also supposed to rain on and off all night, so don't know what his thought process.
We had that again here today too. So the biggest story out of SEC Media Days this week, Greg McElroy saying that someone in the know told him Nick Saban is not done coaching. McElroy says his source was, quote, pretty adamant that Saban will be coaching again. So my question, Jess, if that happens, what do you think are the most likely landing spots where Nick Saban could end up coaching next year?
Got 4 of them for you.
Okay.
I don't think he's going to mess around with anything but the SEC or the Big Ten. He's Nick Saban. Okay. He's going to want to coach at a premier conference at a premier school. I think LSU, Florida, and USC are his top landing spots.
LSU, Florida, USC.
Yep.
Okay. LSU is at the top of my list. Like we've talked about.
He's been there before. If Brian Kelly struggles, it's an easy, rekindling.
That is like, you talk about buyouts and the willingness to come
Boosters
up with money for buyouts.
Have that the next day.
Yeah, if they knew they could get Nick Saban, they would line up and they would just be standing there with their bank accounts.
Baby.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Crank it out, print it out. That's exactly it. So LSU would be at the top of the list, and like I saw Brian Kelly was actually asked about Saban this week, and he was commenting on it, which was interesting. I think Florida State and Oklahoma could be potential spots as well.
I don't think there's enough for him to chew on at Florida State.
I mean, you've still got a great talent pool down there, in terms of recruiting base, and you get a guy like Nick Saban that would draw transfers.
That's why I went Florida.
Yeah, and I think that Florida's on my list as well. I think that, Florida State, you do have a coach, I think, who's on the hot seat, and Venables could very well end up being on the hot seat. And again, like that's a place where he could win, and you're in the SEC now, so I think Oklahoma would be there. I have USC a little bit lower, but I do think that USC could be a potential spot as well. A dark horse is Texas Tech for me. Now, it's obviously not a traditional, kind of what you said. It's a little bit, it's obviously not SEC, but Texas Tech, with all the money that they're throwing into NIL, that they've been, like these last couple of years, they are sinking a ton of money in there. They've got a coach in Joey McGuire who's basically been okay. He's got a couple of 8-win seasons and another 7-win season.
They're recruiting at a high level too down there.
They're recruiting better because,
remember,
again,
that's who Notre Dame wanted, the Texas Tech guy.
Yep, for general manager. That's right. So Tech is a little bit of a dark horse in this whole thing, but I would definitely put LSU at the top of the list, just like you.
You think he would deal with the NIL and portal more so than he would go back to the NFL, right?
See, and I still think the NFL would not be for him. I think that the difference now, because
I think he just wanted to see how the landscape would change. He didn't want to be a part of it. He wanted to see the dust settle a little bit.
Yeah, and like how much his attitude has changed on the transfer portal and NIL, because I do think that those were huge factors in him getting out of coaching. But, again, remember, like the guy's 73 now. So if he comes back next year, he's 74. Like he and Belichick are both around the same age. So he's not getting younger. But I think the difference now is with all these schools hiring the general managers to take care of so much of that stuff that maybe, I don't know exactly. Like Alabama's always had like just ton of support cast. But yeah, like that's something that he wouldn't have to deal with. You've got a GM to handle that stuff for you. So I feel like it's at least changed enough in the last, year and a half or, almost 2 years since he's been out, but maybe that helps it out. Yep. Justin's thinking along the same lines. I think that, that having that GM changes things quite a bit. So it'd be really interesting, but I think LSU, like if they're 9-3, 8-4 again, I think that they're going to,
if they're 7-5, you might as well just book it.
Yeah, 7-5. There's no chance BK stays. Let's talk about the All-Star game.
Oh,
you want to? Do you like? I don't know. Like, do you want to talk a little NFL quarterbacks first?
I got time.
I don't know how much time you got.
I don't care about him.
I don't know when your maintenance guy is going to show up. So according to a survey of NFL executives, coaches, and scouts, here are the NFL's top 10 quarterbacks. Again, this is compiled data, votes from NFL executives, NFL coaches, and NFL scouts. Patrick Mahomes, number 1. Josh Allen, number 2. Joe Burrow, number 3. Number 4, Lamar Jackson. Number 5, Jaden Daniels from Washington. Matthew Stafford, 6. Justin Herbert, 7. Jared Goff, 8. Jalen Hurts, 9. Baker Mayfield comes in at number 10. Do you have any issues with that order?
I got 4 issues with that order.
Ooh, okay.
Jaden Daniels shouldn't even be in this top 10. He was 1 year in the NFL. 1 year in the NFL.
And that's what I don't know for sure that they're saying these were the, the top 10 guys last year, versus like these are the, you know what I'm saying? Like for last year, as opposed to these are just flat out the top 10 quarterbacks. But go ahead, because I would agree with that. I think Jaden Daniels is a bit high.
He's not even in my top 10. I hate to have to do this, but Dak Prescott would belong in my top 10.
See, and I think he gets left out because of the fact that he was injured last year, which goes back to, are we just talking about last year or are we talking about overall? Because the guy did just finish second in the MVP voting. Andrew brings up a good question. CJ Stroud, not as good last year.
I'd have him
as he was as a rookie.
I'd have him in over Jaden Daniels, though.
Would you?
Yes, 100%.
I mean, Jaden Daniels had a really good year last year, but I think 5 is way too strong. And I'm looking at, I'd probably have him, I think Justin Herbert is a good quarterback, but I would probably have him in over Justin Herbert. And again, you remember after the season, or after the Super Bowl, and we were talking about, and I think a lot of people were talking about, is Jalen Hurts a top 5 quarterback? And a lot of people wanted to say, he needed to be, well up there, second or third behind Patrick Mahomes or whatever, because he just won the Super Bowl. And, we were given our list, and some people, said our list was stupid. And, we'll talk more specifically about Jalen Hurts in a minute. Baker Mayfield, though, last year, if we're going off last year, I would put Baker Mayfield ahead of Jalen Hurts.
So here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to simplify things. To me, it's semantics what your actual order is, 1 through 10. I think as long as you have the group of 10, that's really all that matters. I would remove Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts from this list, and I would add Dak and CJ Stroud. I don't care what order you put them in, 1 through 10, but I think those are the 10 best quarterbacks in the league.
You think that? Okay, I'm sorry. Say that again.
Of this 10, no particular order, just having the 10 best quarterbacks, I would get rid of Jaden Daniels, I'd get rid of Jalen Hurts, and I would add Dak Prescott and CJ Stroud.
Okay.
So I'd kick out Hurts and Daniels, add Stroud and Dak. However you rank them 1 through 10, I don't care, but I think both of them belong in the top 10.
Yeah, Don wants to say that Dak is not top 10. We're probably not going to convince you. Don also says, how is Jalen Hurts number 9? I don't know, because I think he deserves to be around number 15 personally, but
he's not he can't really throw the ball.
No. I mean, that is just a fact. And we'll talk about that specifically here in a second. And again, I agree with what you're saying. Mahomes is unquestionably number 1. And it's basically splitting hairs for those 3 guys behind him.
Allen, 1 through 4 is splitting hairs.
Allen, Burrow, and Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Mahomes has won Super Bowls. Joe Burrow is the only one of those guys who, was unable, or, Joe Burrow is the only one of those guys who was able to beat Patrick Mahomes. And I think that, once you get rounding out that top 10, it's going to be very subjective in terms of who you're going to put in there. I would actually probably put Jared Goff up around 5 or 6 as opposed to sitting down around 8 where he is right there. But I mean, I kind of question, again, you're splitting hairs, but you've got Lamar Jackson at number 4. And the dude threw for over 4,100 yards and 41 touchdowns with only 4 interceptions last season. And he ran for 900 yards. But Allen won the MVP, and he only won 1 more game than Lamar Jackson. And ultimately, neither one of them, did anything in terms of the playoffs. So I don't know. Okay, so now there is a lot of anti-Jalen Hurts stuff going on. There's talk even around Philadelphia that Hurts was just along for the ride in the Eagles Super Bowl win last year. And Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni called BS on that this week. So how many of the guys ranked ahead of Hurts on this list would have made the Eagles better last year? I think that Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Jackson.
I'd say all of them.
Probably Jared Goff. Any of those guys with a legit passing threat. Look, the guy can run. Okay, but how many of his running touchdowns were because of the tush push?
Right.
You've got a great offensive line, and you added a 2,000-yard rusher, a guy who probably should have been the MVP last year in Saquon Barkley. I mean, why were the Philadelphia Eagles head and shoulders better, in terms of winning games last year? Because of Saquon Barkley. They had to grind out a lot of wins last year. They weren't putting a lot of teams away in spite of what a good defense they had. And a lot of that was because Hurts was holding them back because of his inability to pass any more consistently than he did.
I would say you could almost say anyone on this list. Maybe no Jaden Daniels and no Baker Mayfield. But other than that, I think everyone else on that list would have taken the Eagles to a similar position.
Someone said that Dak Prescott is an interception machine. He's got a 2.5 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio for his career.
Well, they just want to regurgitate what the national media tells them about Dak Prescott.
Right.
Dak Prescott is 33-8 versus the NFC 8 and 18-1 versus the NFC East in his last 19 games. He dominates the NFC East.
2 years ago, in his fully healthy season, he had a 4 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio. And again, he was the runner-up for the MVP. And yeah.
I guess I just don't understand how you can make strong proclamations about Jaden Daniels when he's played in the league for one
year. There have been so many guys. Robert Griffin III had a good year. And then look where I realize he had some injuries, but there have been so many flash in the pan guys come in and have 1 or 2 good years, and then they're done before 10 years is even up. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on Jaden Daniels and see if he can actually do it for a second year in a row. Like they had the benefit of a pretty easy schedule last year.
I would say Jordan Love is better than Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think so as well. And that's someone we didn't even talk about for this top 10. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. Yeah, so there's, yeah.
Like you said, I think Hurts is around a top 15 quarterback, not a top 10 quarterback.
All-Star game finished in a 6-all tie at the end of 9 innings last night. So they went to a home run swing-off. And thanks to 3 straight bombs from Kyle Schwarber, the NL finished with the win thanks to the swing-off tiebreaker. Do you buy or sell the home run derby tiebreaker like they had last night?
Huge buy for me. And it's I don't know if you know this, but there was someone on this show maybe a month or two ago who said, MLB should just get rid of extra innings and have a home run derby swing off to end the game. Do you remember someone saying that on this show? I loved it. It's already been a long game. It's late on the East Coast. No one wants to stay up and watch extra innings. Find a way to end it. Everyone loves home runs. Everyone, I watched the home run derby the night before. It's action packed. It gets to the point, and you get the fans out of there. And it's the All-Star game too. You don't want it's All-Star break. They're already doing extra by being at the game, and so there's just no reason to prolong that game. 2, 3, 4 innings, get it over with, action packed. I think there was no better way to end that game.
I love it. I wish I would have still been up. I went to bed when it was 6-0, and from the time of the first pitch until the home run derby thing was over, 4 hours later. That is a long climb when you're starting the game after 8 p.m. Eastern time. I don't know how many people, were actually up watching that, but I mean, it's really cool. It's, watched all the highlights this morning and, got the condensed version. I like it, because like going back to when the All-Star game was in Milwaukee 20 plus years ago, and Bud Selig ultimately decided to put home field advantage in the World Series on the All-Star game, that, it was a tie that made him decide to do that, so he was trying to give teams incentive, and they finally wised up once Bud was gone, and they got rid of the home field advantage, and they figured out this is just an exhibition game. And an exhibit, like, the thing is, I think people like the home run derby better than they like the actual game. Like, I think.
Well, I didn't want to watch the game last night for personal boycott reasons, but I toughed it out and watched the game.
Yeah. Toonsis says, no one wants to watch extra innings. I love when the teams continue to play. Not an all-star game, though. And, like, you go through as many pitchers as you can, during the game, because you're trying to get guys in the game, like Mizorowski got in the game.
True. You don't want to wear out guys in an all-star game.
Yeah, and there were even, there were people complaining, like, well, why wasn't Aaron Judge in the home run derby? Why wasn't Cal Raleigh in the home run derby? A lot of these guys leave the game before it's even over because of travel, so they can get back and actually have a little bit of time off with their family and stuff like that during the All-Star break before they have to start playing again in a couple of days. So, I mean, like, if you don't enjoy watching Kyle Schwarber drop bombs, I don't know what you enjoy if you're a baseball fan.
That's what I mean. Everyone loves the long ball.
Yes, exactly. Joe asked, what's been holding the Cowboys back when Dak was second place
Probably the
MVP?
40 piece that the defense gave up.
I was going to say, have you watched him play defense at all in the last few years? Like, it's a major issue. And even last year, before he was hurt, they had no running game. They had one receiver. Like, I don't, there's a lot of issues with the Cowboys, but the guy playing quarterback isn't it, like,
or the wide receiver.
No. Well, yeah. I mean, not him either, but. So do you like the Derby swing?
That's just what makes the Eagles so good. I'm sorry. Their roster was complete, and that's why Hurts was obsolete. They had a great defensive roster. They had 2 stud wide receivers. They had a great offensive line. They had, like you said, a running back that probably should have won MVP. I hate this doesn't just go for Dak, but unfortunately, when you play quarterback in the NFL, and especially when you play for the Cowboys, losses are going to come back to you. But it's a whole roster thing. A good quarterback can't compensate for everything else that's going on around them. And
Right.
I'll just leave it at that.
And look, to the Jalen Hurts thing, again, Brad Johnson, Trent Dilfer, Jeff Hostetler, they are all Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. None of them will ever sniff the Hall of Fame. None of them were ever considered top 5 quarterbacks in the time that they were playing, but they were on great teams that had great defenses and won Super Bowls. The Philadelphia Eagles just flat out have the best roster in the NFL. There are literally
an owner and a GM that are smart.
Yeah, there are literally 10 other guys who, like, if you had Patrick Mahomes on that team, they would be in the Super Bowl every year and winning Super Bowls every year. As it is, they've got a good chance to be in the Super Bowl, but let's see what they do now that they've been there. Can they repeat?
And Josh brings up a good point. Burrow had fantastic games and they still lost games because their defense was bad. So why does Burrow get that excuse? Why doesn't anyone else get that excuse in the NFL?
Right. Because they don't play with a star on their helmet and they don't have the same kind of scrutiny that those others have.
Craig D might have said my favorite comment of all time. Eli won 2 and he's not much of a QB.
Yeah, but he'll probably end up in the Hall of Fame because he won 2.
Thank you, Craig. You are forever immortalized in my books.
There
you can say whatever you want after that comment.
But they had great defenses and a pretty good overall roster, and they got hot at the right time in the playoffs. And that's what the Cowboys have never been able to do. And Joe says doesn't help that they don't have a winning culture.
100% correct.
Yeah. Yep. You've got an owner.
Listen, I will admit to the downfalls of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah.
And Dak's not that.
Yeah. We've both watched enough good and bad Cowboys football to know who the problem, who the problem lies with and who it doesn't. Do you like the Derby swing off better than starting extra innings with a runner at second base if it was an actual regular season game?
Yes.
I do too.
I would do this in everything except the playoffs.
Yeah.
You play 162 regular season games. Again, no one's trying to potentially play 2 full games. There's an easy way to end this. And it's very well known that the fans want, and this is the thing too, like baseball is trending towards this, long ball, quicker games, all this stuff. And so if you're really, if the MLB is really following their own word about, more action, less time in the games, like during the regular season, there's no need to play extra inning games up to 4 or 5 extra innings. Just do what we did last night. Every team has a slugger and every team loves a little mini home, or every fan loves a mini home run derby. So I'm all for it. I've said this before when I proposed the idea 2 months ago.
I think it's great, because like you said, you save your bullpen, you do all, each team throws his best guy out there, maybe you throw 2 out there and just keep swinging. I think that you'd probably keep more fans in the seats at the end of games.
More people leave when extra innings start,
right,
than they do stay.
They just want to get home at that point.
But if you see home run derby and it's going to be over in 20 minutes, I guarantee everyone's going to stay.
I think so too.
You might have people trying to get back into the stadium.
Would you credit it a full win though? Like, would you give it like maybe a half win or something? Or?
No, I think you would. Everyone's playing by the same rules.
Okay. I love the mic'd up players during the All-Star game. I think this is the 2nd or 3rd year they've done it. Like when they were talking to Clayton Kershaw when he was out there.
I loved it too, but I didn't like PCAs. I thought he was so awkward out in center field when he was mic'd up.
I didn't hear that one. I must not have been watching.
It was right after the Kershaw one. I liked Kershaw's though, because he was like, "Oh, I'm about to throw this slider here. I'm about to." Like, that was cool.
Well, then he was like, "What do you want me to throw here?"
Yeah, but like it felt like PCA was very starstruck and just kind of awkward. If you're gonna do it, but that's the thing is you don't know who's gonna be good and who's not gonna be good, right? But like I do like the kind of, especially during an All-Star game, where it's kind of more tailored to the fan and the fan experience and getting to see maybe some players you don't see all the time and that sort of stuff. And then obviously with Kershaw and his legacy and potentially being his last All-Star game, like thought it was great. But it's one of the few, I feel like, in-game interviews that I actually do enjoy.
Brian says, worst idea ever. Need more 15-inning games.
No, so.
as a broadcaster who has called his share of 15-inning games and, who is also, even not broadcasting, has sat through some very long games, I would say no to that. I would just no. Because as a fan, not only are you going 15 innings, so you're playing like another more than half a game once you get to 15 innings, like they've cut off beer sales. You can't even buy a beer at that point.
Well, like let's think about this. If it's the third game of a series and a team needs to go, get on a plane immediately after and head towards the West Coast or, whatever it might be, we're talking about player health, getting players to the next city. I just think whatever you can do in the regular season, like if the regular season was 100 games, I would say no. But it's 162 games.
Right.
Like it's a grind of a season. Those extra innings could accumulate to 4 or 5 extra games by the time the end of the season is over. So I'm not saying I want this in the playoffs, but when you're in the grind of 162 games and, we're talking about bullpen arms and player health and getting to the next city, just have some fun,
I think so. Joe asks, do you get rid of the in-game interviews other than the special games? I mean, they really don't do it during the regular season, do they?
Here,
the network games.
They do it on Sunday Night Baseball.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
I mean, but they're not talking to pitchers during Sunday night.
No,
that's true.
Players.
That's true. Now that I think about it, you're right. Like you'll see him talk to a third baseman,
as long as
or whatever.
Eduardo Perez is not asking questions, I'm good.
You're not a big Eduardo fan, huh?
I do not like listening to Eduardo Perez. I think he's a great guy. I think he knows a lot about baseball. I just don't like the way that he talks about baseball, like in the moment, basically.
Yeah.
He's just that guy that's always got to say something extra, like he's always taking it to that next step. And it's like, dude, like,
would you rather have Perez or Smoltz?
Oh, you could throw A-Rod in that question and really put me in a loop.
Man. I'll take it.
I would take Perez.
I would take Perez over either one of those.
Same, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I never want to listen to Apple TV broadcasts again.
Honestly, I'd like to see Pedro Martinez in a booth instead of just in the studio.
That's why I'm hoping whatever this new Sunday Night Baseball is, whatever happens with it, I'm excited because I think it's a great opportunity to get some new voices and faces integrated into baseball.
I agree. Be interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see if it happens because no one so far has bid, like no one has shown like legit interest, that interests Major League Baseball enough and interests them enough. Because I think the deal is only going to be for 3 years, and I think that most of the broadcasters want it longer than that. But MLB still thinks that they're
top dollar.
Like top dollar premium product. That's why they're in the predicament that they're in right now. Ron Darling is really good, Don. I've got the MLB extra innings package and the New York Mets 3-man booth. Gary Cohen as the play-by-play announcer, Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez is the best in baseball. Like I wish when the postseason rolled around, because like they'll put Darling in a playoff booth. I can't remember, like is it TBS maybe that he does it for? But the other two don't do any postseason. Like they should just make that Mets booth a playoff booth, and it would be perfect.
I'm biased towards Boog Sciambi, but
he's not bad. I mean, he's a good play-by-play guy. I wish that there was a little more personality with him.
He's a bit nerdy at times.
Yeah. Not him. I'm talking about a little more personality as the analyst in that Cubs booth.
Oh, yeah. From JD.
Yeah.
Jim Deshaies.
Yeah. And he's not horrible, but it's just a little.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We pushed not quite 2 hours, but we were pushing it, getting there. So a lot of good stuff in the mailbag earlier, and good stuff and good feedback. I always like the pushback whenever we start talking a little Cowboys.
You like to feel it?
Yeah, that's right. Hit the like button before you leave, and if you would, don't forget another request to subscribe to that new WSBT. YouTube channel. I was drawing a blank there for a second. Let me see where we are right now on the new Sports Radio WSBT. 97 subscribers. We picked them all up in the last day, just since we launched that. So Sports Radio WSBT, head on over there, give it a follow. You're going to start finding the YouTube rapid fire videos posted there once we move over to WSBT next week. Hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow. IB Nation Sports Talk.